Welcome to the road to greatness. Get ready to be inspired and empowered to take your career to the next level. Let's talk about it. Hi, I'm Karlyn Kieffer, and welcome to the Road to Greatness, Season 2. All right, so this means we have more experts, more people who are great at what they do, willing to share their path with you. Hopefully, you'll be able to take something away, apply it to your own circumstances and sets, and help you get to your own great destination. One of the things that came out of Season 1, you may recall, is that every single interview talked about mental agility, emotional agility, and resilience. All three are necessary components to becoming actually great at what you do. So, what does that look like? Well, it's different for everyone. And that's why we're interviewing as many experts as we can find to be able to share their version with you. If something resonates with you, please click like. If you want to hear more, please hit subscribe. And if you feel like you know someone who could probably benefit from a few extra tips and tricks, share. And with that, we're going to go to the road to greatness. Let's talk about it. Welcome to this week's episode of The Road to Greatness. I'm your host, Karlyn Kieffer, and joining me this week, we have a senior vice president of global head of solutions consulting for multiple companies in his career, and someone that I actually admire a lot because on our first formal meeting, I said, wow, so did you go to business school and learn technology, or did you go to school for technology and learn business? Because it's very rare to find someone in that technology space who's equally adept in both sides. And so I think that that is really important for us to talk about in terms of how you balance the business, the leadership, the management, along with the actual proficiency in what you do. So with that, I'd love to bring in Tony Durso. Tony, thanks for joining today.
Thanks, Karlyn. I am flattered that you asked me to join you. You've had some fantastic guests on your show, and when you asked me to do this, I was ecstatic. So I am very happy to be here with you today.
Fantastic. Let's begin. First, just give an idea. Normally, we have sales executives who are in traditional prospecting, working the funnel and then closing kind of salespeople. And you are still in sales, right? Because you're in the technology side of sales. So first, let's talk about what is solutions consulting for those who aren't as familiar.
So solutions consulting, also known as sales engineering, kind of synonymous, depending on where you are. It is the technical arm of sales. It is the consulting arm of sales. Certainly, we are all going towards that quota and hitting our numbers because, as you said, we're part of the sales department, but we're there to do validation of the solution or the products or services that are being offered. We're often trying to play the role of the trusted advisor to give our prospective customers assurances that the product or service we're offering is going to be the right fit for them. So, just like any other sales role, we're doing discovery. We're trying to understand a customer's needs and trying to see things from their point of view. And then we craft a solution. Usually, and at least in my career, it's around technology or some software that is going to help them achieve some type of business goal that they're trying to meet. And so it's a arm in arm kind of partnership with our sales colleagues, and we kind of go together to take down those sales.
So I'm hesitant, but I'm going to do it anyway, to go down the little, not snarky path, negative path. I don't know, not sure, but we'll let the listeners figure that out. One of the things that you say quite frequently, and actually all solutions consultants that I know of say is, we're not your demo monkeys.
Right.
You are, as you've said, equally represented, or it should have equal weight, right? Because the salesperson is responsible for the total sale close, but you all are responsible for the technical close. What does that mean, and why no demo monkey?
Well, yeah, it's a great question, and it's a very common thing that can happen in software companies specifically. I learned years ago, my greatest manager and mentor, Edward Hughes, kind of really teed us up for success when we developed our go-to-market team so many years ago. And it was really about this idea that the account executive and the solutions consultant are partners in the business. And it comes off in a way that makes the customer feel a lot more comfortable. And when it comes down to demoing product, that's always going to be something you're going to do. You have to validate the solution you're offering, but there's still the relationship development side. There's the consulting side, understanding the business needs. You have to have the business acumen as well as an effective sales engineer or solutions consultant to actually be able to connect with the audience, right? Your job is to develop trust, to build rapport, and to ensure that the customer's happy with what they're going to get. And so while the account executive is beholden to that almighty quota that they have to meet, right? That's what they have to do. We, as you say, have an objective as well. There's a level of responsibility we play, right? And you mentioned the technical close, and owning the technical close is also something that Edward really instilled. And that is, you have to take ownership and be accountable for that piece of the business. Like if you don't do that, the AE is not going to hit their number. That deal's not going to get done. We're still selling a product or a service. And so while the account executive is facilitating the relationships, the organization, helping identify opportunity and navigating that with us, we are there arm in arm with them. Two heads are better than one when it comes down to like uncovering pain or finding an ideal solution for a customer. So it's a fantastic partnership that leads to surely an effective demo or some type of technical proof. But credibility is so important, and just showing up and throwing up, as we also like to say a lot, is very ineffective when you're
Yes.
presenting any kind of technology or solution. And because if you do a bad job, one of two things happens: you're eliminated, you're not coming back. And number two, if you're lucky and you and your AE have built good relationships, you might get a second at bat, but most of the time you don't. And so it's crucial that that first contact with the customer and any subsequent presentation, validation of what you're trying to sell to get them a solution, you need to do a lot more upfront work than just clicking through a series of features and functions in a demonstration. So there really is that consulting element to it, and solutioning and creativity really is a big piece of it as well.
I want to go back to something you mentioned earlier with regards to the importance of business acumen. And one of the things I said, obviously, when introducing you was I was so impressed with how you really seem very equally balanced in the two. Talk to me about how did you get there? Which answer that question? Was it for everybody else? I know the answer. But was it technology then business or business then technology?
Look, I'm a child of the 80s. I was very much into, video games and computers when I was a kid. So I kind of knew tech was always a thing I was into. So I had that kind of nerdy side. But I also
Oh, wait, wait,
very
wait. Shout out to all Gen Xers. Just need to have that moment. All right, now keep going.
um but as I was going through high school, it was law became interesting to me. And it wasn't business at first. I was really starting to think about becoming a lawyer. I was doing model judiciary. I ended up working at a law firm in Old Town Alexandria, and I was really then torn between, do I want to go law or tech? I ended up thinking about tech first, starting in computer science, and then said, no, I really like more the people side of tech. And it was, let's not focus on computer science and coding, to the metal of the machine. It was more of, I want to understand why tech matters to people. And this is, of course, now in college, it's the late 90s, and tech is really taking off, and the web is a thing and all that. And I said, okay, let me shift over to the business school. A lot of business schools have an IT function as well, or major, I should say, whether it's management information systems or business information systems or something like that. It's CS light, really. But that was where I really started to shift into this mindset of, how does technology relate to the people side of things? And that's what was really interesting to me. And so I became a consultant, and I did a lot of work in the DC area, doing government contracting and that type of thing for a number of beltway firms. But even then, I was doing a lot of like networking and tech stuff, and it was like, I want to understand why this matters to business. And so as I progressed, I kept getting closer and closer to the business outcomes that tech was solving for. And certainly after the dot-com boom and then burst, it became really, really apparent that tech for the sake of tech was dead. And in the early days, it was everybody's doing tech, so you got to do tech. It's almost like AI today. Everybody's doing AI, so you got to do AI. What are you doing with Gen AI today? But before the bubble burst, it was tech for the sake of tech because it was new, and it was innovative. But then after the bubble burst, you had to really be able to articulate why technology was going to be effective to help business outcomes. And so that's kind of where I evolved into this merging of business and technology, and developing acumen for both is actually a really rare skill. And then I discovered this role of solutions consulting and sales engineering, because you don't know about that in college. You don't ever say, I want to be a sales engineer when I grow up, because you don't even know what it is, because most of the time you don't even hear about that job until you've been a consultant for a while. And for the most part, you can't be a good solutions consultant or sales engineer until you've done some consulting, until you've been in the trenches a little bit. And so once you discover it and you say, oh my goodness, that is like the intersection of everything. It's the people side, it's the business side, you're the tech guy. And that was just kind of once that profession kind of came across my radar, that was the ideal kind of merger, back to your original question of business and tech.
Got it. Okay. So it was a very deliberate effort, which talk to me about one of the things that as a trainer and as someone who, I mean, every day that I get up and go to work, it's about helping someone learn something new, refine something they already know, et cetera, through pro tip partners. I'm a strong advocate for continuous learning. Where does that play for you? And it sounds like your learning journey evolved and just kept going until you found what fit, but then did it stop? Or what else are you doing to stay on top? And you mentioned, this drift towards AI. If you can't talk it, do it, or whatever, you're going to be replaced by someone who can. Where does that fit for you?
The deliberateness of the learning journey comes at different points for people. Early in the career, it's let me just master my craft. Let me learn my product. Let me be the smartest guy in the room. Let me hone my presentation skills. Let me constantly develop how I'm interacting with people, what's working, what's not. And then as you get good at what you do, and you hone your craft, you can kind of get stagnant a little bit. Even when I got into leadership and where my journey took me there, you start to develop what works for you, what are your best practices. You have to be very mindful of what is working and not working. You got to read the room. So learning to me is more about observing, reactions, outcomes to things you do. And eventually you get really good at your craft and or whatever it is that you're doing if you're focused on it. And then once you're actually doing pretty well and things are kind of humming along, you can tend to stagnate a bit. And you start to realize that the world is going to pass you by if you don't stay on top of things. So a constant reinvention of yourself is required, meaning what are today's trends, business and tech, even generationally, right? As you go through your career, different generations come into the workplace. How do you work with them, not against them? How do you learn from those that are new? I think one of the coolest things I ever did was bring together teams of very, very seasoned professionals and fresh out of university, junior professionals. And the amount of learning that they could do from each other was just amazing to watch. So that was a very intentional thing I did. And so even for my own part, it was a learning one day that I was like, you know what? I take for granted that I think I know more than people that are a lot younger than me, but I don't. And I think there's this awareness of you can learn from all kinds of different places, whether you like to read business books, whether you like to attend seminars, whether you're going back to school or whatever it is you're doing, getting certifications. There's experiential learning as well. And how you can learn from others, I think, is something that I try to be mindful of. And then, of course, watching peers and colleagues. What are they doing right? What are they doing wrong? Those are the things I tend to do when it comes to how do I continuously improve myself. It's a lot of observational, action, reaction types of things. But really, I think it's about being mindful, being aware that you're not always going to be the smartest guy or gal in the room every day. There will be somebody that steps up one day and is smarter than you, which is actually a good thing. And recognizing that you can learn from others is the most important part of learning. Because if you're switched off to it and you've got a big ego or something like that, you're never going to learn anything.
Agreed. And that's one thing that I've noticed just in my own work, my own life, my own what have you, the fact that my bonus baby, for people at home, that means stepdaughter to me, without the evil Disney picture image there. So, but what I noticed with my bonus baby, there are so many things she's incredibly good at. She's just at the start of Gen Z. And because I always say that young people grew up with computer chips, email was invented while I was in college, right? So I'm that old. And so learning from the different generations, there's always something to be learned from people who have been in your path already. And then those who are coming up and aren't tainted, or don't have the constrictions of what has happened or what was a thing, their minds can actually just flow a little bit longer. So I love that and being open to that. One piece that you and I have talked about outside of here is the fact that, and you mentioned a little bit of the emotional intelligence in your answer, and then also talked about the continuous learning from the different generations and aspects just in life, period. one thing that people use often to evaluate talent, see if people are a good fit, they do, whatever, is they do personality profiles, right? So whether it is um, Myers-Briggs or DISC or whatever. And you are a very unique individual in that your personal tests very differently than your professional. Do you put weight on things like that, knowing that your test always kind of sparks something a little different?
That's a funny question. And yeah, you reminded me that. So we've all done Myers-Briggs, over the years, but I've done DISC twice. And no kidding, I broke the test twice. Um, when we did it at our former employer the first time around, the facilitator said, Tony, we need to redo your test because your scores are so divergent. Your home persona, your work persona, you broke the test. You got to do it again. And I said, okay, fine. I did it again. More recently, this year, in fact, I took DISC again and got the exact same response from the facilitator. It said, "We need you to redo this test." And I said, "What?" And I was a little bit offended, but I was like, this happened to me once before, and I said, "Okay." So I did it again, and so I think those types of uh, tests are indicators of your preferences. They're not necessarily a box to put yourself in, and most of those do recognize that you're on some type of spectrum within the different areas that they're checking for. But look, you grow and you change, and the results for those types of things change as well. So you just have to be aware of your strengths, your weaknesses, your own preferences. Um, and like I said before, with anything else, be mindful of that. So do I put stock in it? A little bit, yes. I think it helps you understand where a person is coming from a little bit if you know what their type is or their personality traits are. But I really like to focus on individuals. I don't, and this goes to hiring, it goes to building teams. There's no cookie cutter approach to any of this, and you have to invest the time in understanding the individuals. And those types of things can help, but I don't think they should be definitive, nor should you use them to put people in a box.
I love that. And just which is the argument all the time is talk to me like you know me,
Yeah.
which I'm actually going to point out one of your superpowers that I notice is that wherever you are and however big your team may be, and the fact that it's been global, you always know the people on your team.
Yeah.
You may not know everybody's minute little detail, but you know all the people on your team. You know
Yeah.
them by name, you know them, in the role that they play, what some of their strengths are, where they could use some development.
Yeah.
How do you stay so in tuned and engaged with a global team? And what are the practices that help you stay on top of that?
Well, it's different depending on how you got there. So in my previous role, where I grew a team from 4 people in kind of a startup mode almost to a global organization of close to 200, I was there through that whole journey, and I handpicked almost everybody. And so you stay involved in the hiring process. You don't delegate hiring. You keep your organization very flat if you can. You minimize middle management so that you are closer to the ground. You're closer to the people, even at the entry levels, right? I built a campus recruiting program, and at Appian we did that, and that program's been running since 2018, and we grew it very slowly over the years, the Associate SE program. And these are junior professionals, kind of what I was referring to before. They're coming out of college, and I'm offering them a chance to become a solutions consultant. Like I told you before, that's a hard thing to find right out of school. You kind of have to have some experience first. And I kind of defied conventional wisdom there and said you couldn't do it. But anyway, the point here being, no matter how junior the person is on your team, every individual is important to get to know and to understand their talents and their strengths and what makes them an individual contributor to your team. I believe everybody has certain qualities that they bring that are fit within the role, but then every person, you mentioned superpower, every person has their own. I like to try to know what they are for people as well. And nobody's ever beneath you. Nobody's, you can't manage up, manage down, manage sideways. You have to be aware of everything. And you've got to ask people questions. You got to be involved in bringing them into the team. You do one-on-ones. I don't like to call them skip levels. I feel like that's such a terrible term, but I always have an open door. I would always have Tony time available for my team where people would come in. I do one-on-ones with individual contributors all the time, but being very involved in the hiring, being hands-on, taking the time and energy and effort to get to know people is so important, because your team is nothing but people, right? You have a product, you offer services, you have all the other things that make up a company or an organization or a firm, but it's the people first and foremost. And my whole philosophy is people first, and understand the individuals and what makes them individuals, and help that become the thing that makes them the best at what they do in their own way. So that's when you're building a team. When you're inheriting a team, it's a little bit harder. The people don't know you. You didn't hire everybody. You have to be a lot more deliberate in reaching out to people to get to know them. But when you didn't bring them on board and you're the new guy maybe, or the new gal, it's, you have to all of a sudden realize, oh, I have to start establishing trust in a different way. How do I do that, right? So doing a different level of outreach, which, that's one of the things that I still continue to learn, is the differences between taking on something that existed before versus building something yourself. But it's being deliberate about getting to know people, because they're the ones that are going to go to bat for you and your firm. I mean, I firmly believe that in leadership, you're only as good as the people that work in your organization and with you. It's not about you anymore. It's about creating a garden, planting seeds, nurturing those seeds, and building a team of people that you can trust to go crush it, do their job, and then watch them shine and watch them grow. And you can't do that effectively unless you try to get to know your people as best as you can.
I love that. Okay. Time for us to take a very quick break. When we come back, we'll talk to Tony a little bit more about how you actually identify a member of your team's superpower, and then how do you, as he say, plant the seeds? How do you help them grow so that superpower is fully Justice League or Marvel ready? Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Are you ready to elevate your team's performance? Introducing Pro Tip Partners. With over 20 years of experience in enablement and learning and development, we've helped businesses like yours achieve amazing growth outcomes. Our focus areas include sales enablement and effectiveness, manager and leadership development, and our unique improv for business workshops, helping your teams enhance their confidence and ability to embrace the unknown. For your customer-facing teams, we provide professional communication training to make presentations engaging and interactive. At Pro Tip Partners, all our workshops are engaging, fun, and build on best practices for proven business growth. For companies needing a fractional executive to jumpstart new initiatives without increasing headcount, we're your go-to partner. Visit us at protippartners.com or call 301-4PRO-TIP for a free needs assessment. Pro Tip Partners, elevating performance, empowering growth.
Welcome back. And just before the break, we were talking to Tony about identifying your team's superpowers. How do you do that? And then what do you do with it once you've identified it? How do you cultivate it, grow it, nurture it, make it even a stronger Marvel worthy was the word I was looking for, more Marvel worthy superpower?
It's a good question, and it's not always easy, but you want to try to find, whether it's an interview process or getting to know people, you want to find out what makes them tick, as far as what are the things they're passionate about, whether it's inside of work or outside of work. When I'm interviewing candidates, it's always trying to uncover some of those things during the course of the conversation to see what gets them to light up. Asking them about some creative pursuits, for example, that they might engage in. I would ask specific, and I mentioned creativity earlier, but there are certain parameters of the job, any job you do, that you've got to meet. Your talent has to be, you have to be a good presenter. You have to be a technologist. You have to know this. There are certain basic fundamental criteria. Those are the things, just check the boxes for you to be good at your job. The things that'll make you great at your job and your profession are the things that are individual to you. So trying to uncover those is important. So when I think about building a team, I think of like, all right, everybody can do a certain set of skills at a baseline, because some of the ones I just mentioned. But who's the go-to person for X, or who's the go-to person for Y? And when I talk to people, I ask them, like, what's the thing that you always get called upon to do in your current job or right now? What is the thing that you are best at that they say, Karlyn, we need you for this because of this reason? What is that thing that you get called on to do? And let's focus on that a little more, and let's figure out, how can we leverage that inside the work you do? Can you introduce that into your day-to-day or your customer interactions, or something that's going to make you stand out individually? Sometimes, with like my campus program, it was extracurriculars. It was what are the projects that they would do on their own. So sometimes they would get shocked by my questions about this because they're expecting just all these very rigorous, like, behavioral questions about their future profession, and really just want to know what makes them tick. And then I want to grab that thing and find a way to incorporate it into their work and make that be their thing on their team, right? I build a lot of pods within teams, right? So everybody has a baseline set of skills, but within that pod or squad, you've got certain people that will support each other in certain ways. Not everybody can be an expert at everything, especially in tech. You've got to be a generalist in a lot of areas. You got to be an expert in the thing you sell, but there are other things you've learned or gathered in your career that you can bring to bear, whether it's connecting to a customer on a certain thing that they have that you've been familiar with, whether it's technology or an industry vertical or experience you've had. Try to pull those things out and celebrate that, right? Like make that their thing, but don't try to cookie cutter everybody. Don't try to just make everybody the same. And that's just kind of a management philosophy in general. So make them understand that that's good. And that's
Yes.
that their individuality is what got them here and is going to help get them there. Not by not conforming necessarily. Certainly you have to conform to certain things, but you want to find the thing that makes them them. And that's what makes a great team. A team is made up of a bunch of amazing individuals that are unique, and that's what makes the team unique, not a bunch of robots.
Yeah, I have said for a very long time that conformity breeds mediocrity, right?
Yeah.
And there's the old cliche, why are you trying so hard to fit in when you're born to stand out? We all have our own superpowers, and I love that you're trying to help people recognize their own. You can see them, help it, get it out there. So part of that, though, is what makes you a great global leader. So again, we talked about the fact that, and actually in a previous guest, head coach Rick Barnes also talked about the importance of remembering people's names, getting personal, asking them questions, connecting on more than just the business side of things. Talk to me about your leadership philosophy. How are you motivating? How do you get folks want to follow and not just feel like they're getting in line, as you said, like robots?
Yeah. Leading is taking the first step. That's the point. It's doing the things that you're going to ask your people to do. It's never asking them to do something you wouldn't do yourself. It's developing trust first and foremost, bidirectionally, meaning if you trust your people, they're going to work harder to do a good job. If you micromanage them, if you over monitor them, they are going to dislike you. They're going to dislike their work. So part of the, focusing on the individual is also allowing them to grow and not expect perfection right out of the gate. But the overall management philosophy and leadership philosophy for me is focus on individual strengths, make sure that every individual has the opportunity to succeed and fail, as I mentioned. Like you can't be afraid to make mistakes. We are not soldiers or doctors. There are not lives at stake for the type of work we're doing. So you got to give people a chance to grow and make those mistakes. Certainly you don't want to kill a critical deal, but you want to make sure that people have that trust as well. So trusting them to do their work. I hire them to do a job, not for me to do it for them or tell them how to do it. Being vulnerable yourself as a leader, being very transparent, being very direct. I think I've gotten a lot of criticism from my peer leaders sometimes. It's like, Tony, you're too open with your people. You're too transparent. You got to separate a little bit. And it's not about being friends with your people. It's about them learning that you were there for the right reasons. And we all have heard the cliches of, people don't leave companies, people leave managers, and people, choose your next boss and all this type of stuff. That's very true. So for me, one of the first things to do is recognize that I have to be vulnerable first, but also transparent. There's a balance between expectation that you set for them to have to make sure they're performing and hitting their goals. And as an organization, we're achieving our targets, but also allowing them to thrive in the way that's best for them. I think also, as a leader, you have to have a bit of a mindset that is less about yourself and more about your team. I always take the approach of, I am only as good as my people, period. I've had, and a lot of people, a lot of people that have come to me over the years and said, Tony, I want to be a boss. I want to be a manager. Anybody can be a manager. You can learn a set of skills to be a manager. One of these guys who and said, I want to be a manager. It's my next step. I have to progress my career. And I said, why? He said, I want to be a boss. I want to tell people what to do. I'm like, well, you're not ready. And he got frustrated and he came back and he's like, I want to be a leader again. And I said, well, you can be a leader today. What do you mean? I said, I'm not giving you a title. I'm not giving you a promotion, but you can be a leader today. As an individual contributor, you start to show the characteristics of a leader from day one based on the way you behave with your peers. Are you taking initiative to mentor, to coach, to guide, to help, to assist? That's leadership. Getting the job is kind of the next step. The other thing that I always ask people, so people over the years have come to me and asked for my advice on, should I stay an individual contributor? Should I get into leadership? And a lot of times it's superstars, right? You and I both have known a number of like A players, superstar, AEs, SCs that are like their next step is to be a manager or a leader. And some of them are horrible at it and they fail at it completely. Why? Because it's about self. It's about ego. So what I often ask people is, okay, you want to be a leader, you want to be a manager. Are you done in your career with receiving accolades and awards? They all
Ooh,
look at me and say,
interesting question.
what do you mean? I said, are you satisfied with the individual recognition you've received up to this point in your career? And some of them are confused. And I say, and they ask why. I say, because once you take this type of responsibility or role, your job is to give recognition. Your job is to promote others and not yourself. And I think
Yeah,
the biggest failures in leadership are those that continue to promote their own ego, their own self, their prima donna kind of nature. It's not the point. You have to have humility. I think that is another part of the philosophy. It's not about you. You as a
hmm
leader are going to be recognized as an amazing leader when your people are fantastic. The best part of my day is when I get kudos from unsolicited partners, colleagues, customers. When they say, Tony, this person on your team did an amazing job today, that's my award, right? Or
right.
we had a pillar award that we'd give out every quarter that was a very prestigious award for people to achieve. To me, my pillars are my team, right? To me, the biggest award is the recognition that people give to me. In fact, I save these things. Like I was thinking about it today before our conversation. When somebody on your team sends a letter to the CEO that says, Tony is an amazing leader, he needs to be promoted even higher in the organization. Like part of the culture, part of the performance, and all the things that we are doing well is attributed to his leadership. But that's unsolicited stuff. That
That's
to me is
awesome.
like the super heartwarming stuff that almost brings you to tears. And like these are the people that work for me, with me, that are saying this type of stuff. And so those are my awards. Like that's really what I care about. I don't care about the trophies and the pillars as much. And I think that's a leadership mentality that I think more people would maybe do well by taking on.
Yeah, no, I agree. And it's actually even though, I don't manage people here within Project Partners, I one of the things that I love most about my job is that I'm out bringing out the best in other people. I love it when they come back and say, "Hey, I tried this and then I closed this deal," or hey, my sales cycle went from 18 months down to 11 months because I just made these tweaks along the way or something like that. And then you're right, you come back and you go, ah! And you get to be the world's greatest cheerleader, even if you are behind the scenes. It's pretty awesome. So break down, you drew the distinction between management and leadership. So break down the differences. What do you see as the primary differences? You should be, if you are in a people leader position, you should be both.
Yeah.
What are those both? How do those two break out, I should say?
So I think the first leadership book I read was called First Break All the Rules. And it was based on some research that was done by Gallup. And it really was what kind of, along with some of the folks I mentioned earlier, helped me think about what the individuality component was as you think about leading people. That management is a set of skills that can be learned by anybody, right? There are management disciplines. There are things that you can be taught when it comes to management. It's organization, it's goal setting, it's metrics, it's KPIs, it's moving people through projects, it's all of that stuff. Leadership is more about what I talked about before. It's what are you doing individually? And you can, I'm not going to go nature nurture here, whether you're a natural born leader or not, or if it's something that you can learn. People will have their own philosophies on that. I think if you have the desire and the will to do it, you can be both. But I believe management skills can be learned and then can be repeated. Leadership skills are something that you deliberately need to uncover, define, develop for yourself. but they're unique to you also. But they're the things that drive people to want to follow you, right? It's more
Right.
about the intention of, and also back to what I just said about reward and recognition. What is your reason? What is your why for wanting to be a leader? Sometimes people are pushed into leadership roles and they thrive. Sometimes they don't. Some people chase it and they're ineffective at it for the wrong reasons. So I think it's just a matter of the discipline of management and the tasks you have to do as a manager versus what makes you a good leader as an individual. You bring those together, and that what will be your success or failure.
Yeah. Let's go back to one of the things that you said you look at from the employees that you're looking to hire and the candidates that you're actually interviewing. You talked about what are their creative pursuits. I know you and your entire family are Marvel junkies. You still do game night and such. Talk to me about your own creative pursuits and how do those things affect who you are at work?
It's funny. I have too many hobbies, which I am almost having no time for these days, so that's sad. But I'm an avid reader. Um, Not as much business books, some of that, of course, but a lot of fiction as well. I play a lot of board games. I've been doing that since I was in middle school. I have over 500 strategic, board games I like to play.
Wow.
I mentioned, techie, nerdy stuff earlier too, video games. I love that stuff. But board games are a more social activity. They're competitive. They require you to think, but you're sitting around a table with people. It's physical. You're touching things. You're drinking. You're having a good time. You're competing. So it's a more social hobby
So
that
what are the favorites there? What are the favorite games?
nobody's going to know them, but
Really?
Power Grid is one of my favorite games. I love classic Civilization. There's a whole, host of games, but those are a couple. I even like the old school dungeon crawl every now and then. I have
So
a
all the
very, very
scenario stuff, it
yeah, well,
sounds
a
like.
lot actually. Power Grid, the first one I mentioned, is very much like it's a business, it's an economic game. There's also a whole series of train games that are all about business and making money and stock trading and stuff like that too. So it
Hmm.
sounds terribly boring to some people, but
No.
it's a lot of fun. Anyway, I have a gaming group that's been going for over like 20 years. That I've had people come over every Wednesday night. For all those years. I've had a lot of the same folks come in and out of that group over the years, and I've had a couple of people change out. And it's almost started with some of these kids are kids from high school that I used to.
Wow.
But so there's that. I spend a lot of time with family. My wife and I are big foodies. We have our dogs, that type of thing. We love to cook together. Cooking is a creative endeavor. My wife is a huge cook, and we each have our own stations in the kitchen, and we cook together. And she does her thing, and I do mine. And
Wow.
that's and you can, those are the types of things that are great to talk to people about as well when you're trying to get to know your team. In fact, I introduced Power Grid to a colleague recently, and he was just amazed. And he's like, "This was so fun. This was awesome." Most people will understand, board games like Catan, or even going back to old school stuff like Monopoly and Risk. But
I was
um,
gonna say those were mine, like
yeah,
Scrabble and Boggle and
yeah, that's everybody knows those. But the hobbyist board games are another whole different world, and maybe too nerdy for people. But it is a good social pursuit, and it gets you away from the screen time too, right? We spend a lot of time in front of screens, and so more time in front of people is actually a good thing.
very nice. Yeah, I'm gonna have to go check out my board game thing. Sorry and Candyland as a kid and all the things. Like I
Well,
don't have all these elevated level games that sound more heady, so I'm gonna have to go take a look.
but it was also, I mean, you might remember we used to do those board game nights at the old office, and
Yeah.
I'd have my team come in and we'd do it, and so it was also just good bonding for the in the workplace as well sometimes too. But it makes you
Yes.
think, right? These are competitive things, they're thinky things, right? It just it triggers like the social as well as the mental kind of stimulus. So
Always good. Always good. Again, in that continuous learning, but also the creativity of problem solving and what have you
yes.
when you get to engage in those other things. What are some of, actually, I'll ask it on both sides. So what is number one career highlight thus far? And then also what is your I want a do-over thus far or could use a do-over or something
Oh,
to that effect.
well, okay, let's take the first one. Career highlight. Look, I think, I learned a lot along the way. I was fortunate enough to take a team and build it over the course of many, many years from, as I described before. That also allowed me to start doing innovative things, or what I thought were innovative things, to not just do the job of building a team that can crush it, get, 90% win rates on our deals and whatever, but what else could we do? How can we scale? How can we do things better? So, one of the coolest things I think I did was I built something called the Spear Team at our old company. As you said, I'm a Marvel nerd, right? So everybody who knows Marvel knows Shield, right? So I built thinking that pre-sales is always the tip of the spear, right? We're always the front end of the sale. We're showing the new product, the latest and greatest stuff. I wanted to build a team of people that was kind of like a SWAT team. And I said, all right, how can I channel my Marvel here? And so we created the Spear Team, my strategic pre-sales execution and readiness team. And in that team, I kind of alluded to this a little bit before, but I needed a SWAT team to provide scale to the field, to provide enablement to the field. I had some very, very senior principal solution architects that were being leveraged across the team in a number of different ways. I wanted their experience and their skill to actually be shared amongst everybody else. So I brought them together. And then inside that, I also brought together that campus program I talked about. So we built the associate solutions consulting team, and we put them together. And people would ask me, why did you put these super senior like experts in the same team with this set of fresh grads out of university? And I would put them on projects together, right? The senior folks were out there closing big deals, they're solving big problems, acting in the kind of like a field CTO role. The junior team are going through a 1-year program just to learn how to be an SE, learn the product, learn sales, learn messaging, all the things we do. But we would put them on projects together. But what was great about that was also what I talked about in the beginning. It was this idea that the senior folks, the more seasoned veterans in solutions consulting could teach the more junior folks, but the unexpected result was that the new folks were teaching the more seasoned ones a lot as well. And putting them together on projects was a really cool thing to watch. And it was productive. It wasn't just a project or a science experiment. We got a lot of good content, a lot of good reusability out of it. We got a lot of innovation on how we approach the market. So putting that together was a lot of fun. I kind of handed it off at one point, and it's still running to this day. But I think within that, building that campus program, I was told, no, you can't pull that off when I first tried to do it multiple times. Even, by very, very senior folks. And I said, you know what, I'm going to do this anyway. So kind of on the sly, I worked with recruiting. I'm like, give me two college kids, and then it was two, and then 4, and then 6. And then I started bringing in a team of like 8 to 10 every year. We expanded it into a different country. And these young professionals, watching them grow has been astonishing, because I started this now in 2018. So it's been quite a while. And many of them are now moving into leadership roles. They are fast tracking to becoming senior solutions consultants. They are winning those awards. They are coming out as like the cream of the crop. So to me, being told I couldn't pull this off, couldn't build this program, doing it anyway, seeing the success, handing it over to people, letting it continue to run, and watching the people's careers really develop from that, that's been probably my coolest, proudest moment. It's not closing a big deal. It's not anything like that. It's about being able to do something like that allowed others to kind of thrive and grow. I'm still in touch with a lot of them, right? And did dinners with the latest class that graduated and got promoted, and
Nice.
that's super rewarding.
Excellent. Is there something, or actually, rather than putting it as a mistake or an oops, what is your biggest lesson learned? What did you do differently because of something,
Not sure I've done
event
it
or
differently yet.
conversation?
Yeah, not sure I've done it differently yet, but I've had short tenures at some companies. I've had very, very long tenures at other companies, and everything in between. You have to understand that each organization is different, its culture is different, how they got there is different. Your role within it has to be different than where you came from previously, right? You can take your best practices, the things you have like rock solid known to work for you in one place might not work in another place. And this goes back to the question you asked earlier about continuous learning. So being mindful of, all right, I know these are best practices in the industry, in this profession that I have, in this career. Like this is what I built myself and my own reputation and brand around. I'm going to take it to this other organization and apply it. It doesn't always work. So you have to kind of calibrate yourself and say, all right, what are the things that I know to be good and effective and more transferable broadly across organizations? And then what are the things that I need to adapt and change on as it relates to this team, this culture, this place where this company is in its growth cycles, right? Are they startup? Are they mid? Are they, a multi-billion dollar organization? And I wouldn't say a do-over, but more of a, oh, I wish I'd learned that sooner sometimes. Like, okay, let me get the lay of the land a little bit. Let's understand, put your ego aside, and really figure out how you can apply what you've learned to the new place you're in.
Right.
And that's something that everybody should take to heart because you can come in very strongly, and I've seen this in, when a new leader comes in to an organization, they just come in, they start breaking glass and wanting to change rapidly and just break down what is already there and sometimes working extremely well. You don't want to be that person. You want
Right.
you want to be effective as soon as possible. You want to produce value or create value where you are, but you also have to understand where you are. Understand your point of origin, look at the feet on the ground where you are, and then go from there.
Yeah, it's everything that you've said, and I've been kind of tying things together over the course of our conversation here. The bottom line, in terms of how I would describe you, you sound very much like the builder.
Yes.
You're the person who is, in fact, being the architect or the engineer that is figuring out the balance, figuring out where the effort goes, where the people go, what works, and trying to create either something from nothing or improve what's already there. And I find that, and I'll even use one example. I do remember COVID, which was a time no one will ever forget, at least while we're around. And the initial moment of no one being able to go into office, at least not corporate office space, and you were part of that team that helped think up, do new and create this application that was allowing people to self-police, self-check health and do their health and wellness before coming back to office, so they weren't posing a health risk to others, and doing that. And I remember you saying, that was just invigorating and exciting. You love to build things. What other ways do you practice building things when you aren't building your team, or when you're not building your team? It sounds like it also translates. Sorry, it also sounds like it translates into your gaming. It sounds like you're building in that as well, right?
It does. It does. No, I like a lot of hands-on hobbies as well. I mean, part of gaming is like, building and painting war miniatures. Right? No, most people don't know I love that as well. So there's
That's
like
new to me too.
There's almost, huh?
I said that was new to me too.
Yeah, I
Okay.
mean that's like super deep levels of nerdy, but I don't have a lot of time for it these days. But I always had hands-on hobbies as well. So I was, if it wasn't for technology, I would be doing physical labor. Like I like to create with my hands, and so whether it's tinkering with motorcycles or cars or other hobbies, I like to do things with my hands as well. So that goes back to the other question, but building conceptually, building with people, building with product software. I always love working with things that have some type of result that's going to make something better for somebody else, or it's just fun. So there's a lot of elements of building in my life, but less on the hobby side these days. But building teams is definitely a lot more fun than repairing teams.
Yes.
And that's repairing is harder, or changing or modifying. So you're right, definitely that the build side is what I enjoy the most.
All right, we are just coming up to the end of our time, but before I go, I need to ask you the same thing I ask everybody else, which is, what didn't I ask you, but I should have?
Maybe, I mean, there are a couple things that we didn't touch on, but maybe how do I measure, or how does one measure success as a leader? For me, I thought about that question a lot over the years. Like, what does it actually mean, right? Is it a metric? Is it a KPI? How do I know that I'm doing well, right? When you're an individual contributor, you're carrying a quota, or you have projects to deliver, or demos to deliver, or outcomes. How do you measure yourself as a leader? Now, you can look at it a number of ways. And I always try to think about kind of a trifecta of a couple of things. Number one, you have a business outcome to achieve, right? In the case of sales, we have a quota to meet. In my case, are we achieving our goals as far as the technical close, the technical win in a given deal? For each of you, us as leaders, you have to figure what's your business metric you're driving toward. Pick one to start. There could be multiples. The next one is, how happy are your people? What are your employee SAT scores? Especially if you're using a third-party vendor or tool or assessor to determine how well you're doing as a leader. And then the third dimension, the trifecta, is what does your attrition look like? And if I visualize all of that as a triangle, like I want to create the biggest, equilateral triangle I can, right? Am I hitting my targets as it relates to my sales goals? Am I increasing my customer SAT scores? In my case, targeting above industry benchmarks. Are my people happy? And then is my attrition low? Now you could look at low attrition and say, well, maybe you're not demanding enough, so nobody's leaving, or maybe you're just too nice and nobody's leaving. But when I had a period in my career when I had the lowest attrition in the whole company, I had the highest employee SAT scores in the whole company, and we were hitting our goals as far as achievement, to me, that triangle was really big. But as you're going through the years, the quarters, or leading, certain points of that triangle could contract and get smaller. And so trying to manage all of those, I think, is really important. So personally, I think everybody as a leader, bringing together, again, management discipline and your own personal leadership style, what are those things that you need to keep in balance to be effective for both the business, for you as an individual, but also for your people? And really kind of touching on all those topics we talked about today. If I'm hitting or exceeding thresholds or scores on all three at a very minimal basic level, then you're doing pretty well. But then the next step is, what's the new point? And which ones can we extend out even further? So find a way to measure your own success, I think, as a leader, that's determined by your own style, I think, is something that's important to think about, and be proud of what you do there. And when one of those things kind of dips below where you want it to be, that's where you need to do some work.
Incredibly insightful, very self-aware, and very thought-provoking in terms of what the leaders who are listening can go back and look at their own teams and make some adjustments for the new year, possibly. So, Tony, thank you very much for joining the conversation, for giving great nuggets, for giving me a couple of games I apparently need to start looking into, and for really being a really great example for the road to greatness. So thanks again for joining.
Thanks, Karlyn. It's been a lot of fun, and thanks for having me.
Did you hear something you liked? Tell me about it at Karlyn RTG Podcast on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, or TikTok. Thanks for joining.